Today we're just going to go through busting some basic myths about teaching science at the secondary level in high schools across the United States. So again, I'm Christopher Moore, and I represent the University of Nebraska at Omaha STEM Trail Center. The Trail stands for Teaching, Research, and Inquiry-Based Learning. And we have a variety of programs for what we call elevating human potential through lifelong learning. And one of the best ways we can do that is by training the trainers, by teaching new teachers and getting them into our classrooms across the nation. What I'm going to talk to you today about is actually has a lot of information that was funded by an NSF grant and a program called Get the Facts Out, which you can find more information about at getthefactsout.org. And the entire project is about changing the conversation around STEM teacher recruitment. And so a lot of the discussion today and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today has been tested to be the types of things that really end up exciting students about the field of teaching. Right, and also really goes into some of those myths that we have about the teaching profession, particularly in secondary science. So once again, I'm Chris Moore. I am co-author of the curricula Experience Physics and Experience Chemistry in high schools all over the country. Right, so if we do recruit you to become a high school chemistry or physics teacher, then these are the curricula you might actually use in your schools. And I'm also author of Creating Scientists and Teaching Science Thinking, which are both books designed for in-service teachers to help them create more engaging environments that really create new scientists and get students excited. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook at Chris Moore Sci, and you can find all the information you would ever want about me at creatingscientists.com. So the very first thing is we want you to be able to inspire young minds, and the way we can do that is by teaching science. Our mission, one of our missions, at least with respect to science teaching at the STEM Trail Center, is we want to take students who have a passion for science, along with an interest in teaching, and provide them a pathway that positions them to make a huge impact in their communities. Any student who decides to pursue a career in teaching is bound to have this significant impact on the people around them. So the very first thing I want you to think about, and you don't have to respond, I just want you to think about it. This is going to kind of set up the discussion. Probably the most important part about our discussion is imagine a ladder where at the bottom rung is the worst possible life and at the top rung is the best possible life. And I want you to think about which step of the ladder you would say you personally feel that you stand at this time, right? Would it be at the bottom, in the middle, at the top, somewhere between 0 and 10? And imagining that ladder has 0 to 10 rungs. Again, you don't have to put this in the chat. It's a very personal thing to think about inside. Right? And then once you've done that, you've thought about rating your life between worst and best life as it is now, then think about on which step you think you will stand 5 to 10 years from now, between 0 and 10. And the whole point of this is to get you to reflect on your what we call your personal satisfaction. Right? And this is based off of a national survey that was done by Gallup, where they asked over 172,000 U.S. workers across the country to go through this exercise. Question 1 was, on which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel at this time? And question 2 was, where do you think you'll stand in about 5 years from now? This is called the Cantrell Self-Anchoring Scale. Right? And again, 172,000 U.S. workers were surveyed, and the responses were broken up into 3 groups, a top group, a middle group, and a bottom group based off of the responses for where people feel like they stand right now and where they feel like they're going to stand in 5 years. So based on this survey, we can make this statement. Did you know that teachers in the United States rate their lives better than all other occupation groups, trailing only physicians? Right, so once again, out of 172,000 U.S. workers polled by Gallup, teachers, K-12 teachers, rate their lives better than all other occupation groups, trailing only physicians. And you can go, and there's a link here, and we can place the link in the chat to this entire presentation if you'd like, if you want to click on that poll and find out more information. But this comes from taking the percentage shown. The percentage shown comes from taking the respondents ranking their lives in the top of the ladder minus the percent ranking their lives at the bottom of the ladder. And you can see that physicians, teachers, nurses, managers, right, all of these are at the top of the list for how we go about ranking our lives. So what factors go into a person's sense of well-being? Teachers seem to have a very strong sense of well-being. And that a large number of factors Gallup found that go into this, from emotional health, healthy behaviors, access to basic necessities, physical health, and work environment. And then there's more that also might include sense of meaning in our lives. And that's a big one for teachers and physicians. In particular, teachers may have very positive impacts on the people around them and their communities. Financial stability. We'll talk about myths about financial stability and teaching salaries here in just a minute. Leisure time. Having a large amount of time to sort of do your own thing, right? Intellectual and emotional stimulating work. Schedule, and having a quality of it and the predictability of it, right? Is your schedule dictated mostly by you or mostly by things that you don't want to do? And then opportunity to learn new skills and knowledge. All of these things go or make up factors that go into person's sense of well-being. And when polled, again, on satisfaction, so this is from teachers, a survey of about 60 teachers, they were asked what provides you with day-to-day satisfaction. And you can see those things coming up again between the relationships between students and between other faculty members and colleagues that they build. Their work schedule and the flexibility of that work schedule that they have, as well as the 9-month contracts that we'll see, where there's a large amount of flexibility in the summers. Teaching turns out to be challenging and scientific. And so a lot of teachers respond that a lot of their satisfaction comes from a constantly learning and getting to learn new things themselves and being able to take a scientific approach to their jobs. The colleagues that they make, learning content, and then the autonomy that they have in their classroom. They're the experts that they get to choose really their own path. So now I'm going to ask a very simple question real quickly. You can respond in the chat if you'd like, right? Or just think about the answer in your mind between A, B, C, D, and E. Which of these do you think is closest to the typical starting salary for a high school teacher? $25,000, $32,000, $38,000, $45,000, or $55,000 US dollars? And you can think about that for a second. And I know the answer that most people select. And I know the right answer, right? But I want you to just put it in your brain what you think the answer is. And then I want you to answer another question. Again, just think about A, B, C, or D or E. You need to post what you think in the chat, or you can think about it. After 15 years of teaching and earning a master's degree, which do you think is closest to the typical physics teacher salary? $30,000, $45,000, $55,000, $65,000, or $110,000 US dollars. And this is mid-career salaries for teachers. Right, so you've thought a little bit about starting salaries for teachers and mid-career salaries for teachers and what you think they might be. Did you know that mid-career teacher salaries typically range between $60,000 and $100,000 US dollars? Right, that's a number that's a good deal larger than most people imagined. Let me give you some examples of teacher salaries from school districts across the country. We're going to look at Provo, Utah, Chicago Public Schools, Omaha Public Schools here in Nebraska, where I happen to live, and then Westminster Public Schools in Denver. So the very first thing I want you to think about is that teacher salaries, all the salaries here being quoted represent 9-month contracts. 9-month contracts mean that 9 months of the year you're under contract and 3 months of the year you are not. So as an example, a $53,000 annual salary on a 9-month contract would be annualized to $71,000. 107K would be annualized to about 143,000 if you thought about it from a 12-month perspective. All right, and the Jordan School District in Provo, bachelor's degrees, very first year, the average starting salary for a science teacher would be $53,000. In Chicago, it's higher, again, because the cost of living is higher, but at $60,000, $42,000 for Omaha Public Schools, and then $52,000 for Westminster Public Schools. So you can see some variation based off of the cost of living, but the numbers are actually a good deal higher than most students and most people in the public actually seem to think. And again, when you think about the 9-month contracts that these represent, annualized, these are much larger starting salaries, especially when you compare it to the average starting salary for a graduate with just a BS degree in physics, as an example. The average starting salary for just a BS in physics is $40,000 annually. It compares well with the average bachelor's degree in science. Now let's think about that. Let's think about those steps as we move forward in our careers. There are some fairly uniform steps that happen as you continue teaching. You can see again in all 4 of these school districts that I'm using as examples here, starting at 1 year and then moving to 5 years with increases in salary. And then earning a master's degree and teaching for 5 years puts you in an even higher class of salary. And then I wanted to get to, because that's starting salaries, I really wanted to get to that 15-year mid-career salary. And this is where you can really start to see that salaries, especially in the larger urban districts such as in Denver and Chicago, begin to increase to over 6 figures, over $100,000 a year. Again, this is not annualized. These are salaries based off of 9-month contracts. Even in Omaha Public Schools, our 15-year career teachers are looking at salaries of $60,000 and up. And that can increase even more depending on whether you go, which directions you go, if you go into administration as an example. Plus, teachers have additional opportunities for income. Those opportunities include tutoring, coaching, after-school clubs, and then summer jobs. Again, when you have a 9-month contract, that gives you 3 months to work on other things during the summer, either for leisure time, which we know provides for job satisfaction, or prep time for getting ready for the next school year, or for doing curriculum writing with the school system, or tutoring, or coaching, or whatever else it might be. Teachers report receiving additional income opportunities between $2,000 and $15,000 during the academic year that they receive for either tutoring, coaching, or after-school clubs, with even more opportunities just from those summer jobs. Those summer jobs can even be rewarding jobs at things like zoos. We have a large number of our teachers that work within the Omaha Metro, the Omaha Henry Dorley Zoo. We also have a large number of teachers that do research at the university with us through the programs that we offer, where they get paid to come to University of Nebraska, Omaha, and do research with a faculty member. And then when we think about teaching, we can also compare teaching salaries for 7th through 12th grade teachers, basically our secondary science teachers, with teachers at 2-year colleges, master's granting institutions, and PhD granting institutions. And you can see that starting salaries actually do quite well in comparison to teaching at the college level. And in mid-career, it actually ends up winning the contest if it was a contest. And the thing to keep in mind, though, is noting of the age difference. So if you look at the starting salaries for a 2-year college, a master's granting institution, or a PhD granting institution like mine, right? Those teachers starting in secondary are usually between 20 and 24 years of age. So they're into their careers and into those starting salaries much earlier, where the average starting age for a college instructor is 27 to 30. Right? So you're in your career faster, earning very similar starting salaries and potentially even larger mid-career salaries. And sticking with some of the financial benefits of teaching, did you know that most teaching jobs have better retirement benefits than other jobs you can get with the same degree? So I want you to think right now about the pension plans for your typical teacher and how it might compare in value to the typical industry 401k. So let's say that you were interested in 2 options. You could be a high school physics teacher as an example, or high school chemistry teacher, or get an engineering degree and work for Lockheed Martin in Denver. And what you're going to have is the option for retirement as a teacher, and retirement plans, a 401k in particular for Lockheed Martin. And I want you to think about how that pension plan might compare. Is it less valuable by $10,000 a year, less valuable by $5,000 a year, about equivalent, more valuable by $5,000, or more valuable by $10,000 a year? And the actual answer to this is somewhat surprising. So we can look at teaching versus industry, in particular that example that I just gave you, teaching in Denver as an example, as compared to working in Denver for Lockheed Martin. Your average year one salary is going to be $52,000 as a teacher, and your average year one salary is going to be $67,000 as a Lockheed Martin engineer. Now you see there's a fairly sizable difference between the starting salaries. But when we compare the retirement benefits that you receive of about $19K versus the $3K from Lockheed Martin, you can see that the total compensation is roughly equivalent for a starting year one employee. Right, mid-career, right, we can see dramatic differences where you get up to about 120K mid-career in the Denver area, and similar about 100K salary with about 4K and retirement benefits are a little over 100,000 as a Lockheed Martin engineer. Comparing the contracts, you're on a 9-month contract as a teacher and a 12-month contract as a Lockheed Martin. You get 10 to 40 days off as an engineer. You get 74 to 109 days, just depending, where you're not on contract when you're a teacher. And one of the most interesting aspects of it is that the retirement benefits can begin for teachers as early as late 50s, where you can receive up to 87.5% of your highest earned income over the previous 3 years of highest earned income. And that's an example from the Colorado retirement system. All right. Typically for industry, you're retiring at 65, or salary depends on the market performance and your life expectancy. Did you also know that there are student loan forgiveness programs and scholarships for math and science teachers? For example, there's Teach Grants that are federally funded. It's basically free money if you teach 4 years within 8 years of graduating from a degree preparation program. Right? Well, there's also direct and FFEL loan forgiveness of up to $17,500. Right? You can get loan repayments after working as a math or science teacher in low-income schools for 5 years. Right? In fact, and another excellent example would be federal Perkins loans, where a percentage of those federal Perkins loans can be forgiven for each year that you work in a low-income or high-need school, with 15% in year one, 15% in year two, all the way up to full forgiveness by year 5. If you want to know more, right, you can look at this presentation and click on the link, or you can actually just type it in studentaid.edu.gov/SA. We also have programs that give you money directly in the university, and there's programs like this at a lot of universities, but the only one I'm going to tell you about is mine at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, called the Noyce Nebraska Science. And so at any university that you happen to go to, you just look for what's called a Noyce program. These are National Science Foundation funded programs that are specifically designed for pre-service teachers. Our Noyce scholars, who are pre-service science teachers, science and math teachers, get $15,000 per year. And then we have Noyce interns. Maybe before they become a scholar, you can be an intern, where you can get up to $4,000 for the summer and up to 20 hours per week during the academic year, where we can pay you to do all kinds of interesting things. Right now I have a Noyce scholar and a Noyce intern that are working with me within my physics courses at the university. And they're doing all kinds of interesting things from working with students to doing lesson planning and preparing, actually teaching at the college level from time to time. I'm actually in New Jersey right now, and I have a Noyce intern and a Noyce scholar that are preparing to work with my class while I'm gone. You can look specifically for our opportunities at stemtrail.unomaha.edu, clicking under Student Opportunities. Finally, did you know that you can get a job almost anywhere in the U.S. or abroad as a science or math teacher? By looking at the American Association of Employment and Education's Educator Supply and Demand in the United States report, we can see that the relative demand by field, where physics, mathematics, and chemistry in particular are in massive high demand, second only to special ed. So what this means is there's a considerable shortage of physics, mathematics, and chemistry teachers, secondary teachers in the United States. And this is also global. There's a considerable shortage globally of physics, mathematics, and chemistry teachers. So in high demand means that these are the only areas that I can say as a representative of a university that we have a 100% placement rate. That students that go into our pre-service teacher programs and graduate, we have 100% placement rate, putting them in the career that they were trained for. So to give you just a quick summary of all the different things that we talked about, teachers in the United States rate their lives better than all other occupation groups, trailing only physicians. The starting pay nationally is around $45,000 on a 9-month base salary. Mid-career pay nationally is between $60,000 and $100,000 US dollars, again on a 9-month base salary, with many opportunities for earning extra income. A large number of science, high school science teachers retire at less than 60 years old with a full pension. There are student loan forgiveness programs and scholarships for math and science teachers, and you can get a job almost anywhere in the US or abroad as a science or math teacher. Did you know that behind every advance in medicine or technology is a teacher who left a lasting impression? And we want you to think about having a career that's both rewarding and impactful, and being the person who gets to have that lasting impression and really change your community for the better. And that's all I have for you today, and I can answer any questions that you have in the next couple of minutes, but I appreciate you listening and taking the time to consider teaching science in high school as a career option. Thank you,
Chris. Thank you, Chris, so much. I grew up in a, while we're waiting for questions to come in, just anybody who has a question, please put that in the chat, and I'll ask Chris those questions on your behalf. But while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I do have a few questions for you. I grew up in a family of teachers. Grandma was a kindergarten teacher, and my dad was a high school lit teacher, and also taught college on the side. And I had a few interesting questions, I thought. I noticed when you were talking about the salary that Denver was significantly higher than the other states that you had mentioned. And I know that when I started teaching as a first year teacher, I think I made $32,000 for my first year. Is Denver so high because of the cost of living, or is there another reason besides that? Because it looked like it was almost like 40 grand higher when you were, at the 15-year mark.
Yeah, it can be very much so. So at the 15-year mark, as an example, if you look at Omaha Public, where I live, right, it's between it's somewhere around 60K, and then 60,000 or more, and up to 100 or so thousand in the Colorado area. Now, there is a large disparity in salaries across the West for teaching, but most of that comes down to large differences in cost of living. So, for example, in Omaha, you can live in a very nice area and have a very nice home for $250,000 or less. Uh-huh. And in Denver, if you can find a house for $250,000, good luck, because it's significantly more expensive. And so the areas, so like as an example, showing Denver and Colorado, those just have higher costs of living. Right. And so in order to, so when you balance out for that, you end up seeing very similar numbers. Obviously there's going to be distinctions from state to state and from city to city and from district to district. But overall, right, starting salaries on average are about $45K, which is in line with starting salaries for bachelor's degrees in a STEM field, biology, chemistry, and physics.
Okay. We did have a question come in here. Hunter's asking, have any of your Noyce scholars gone on to teach abroad? If so, where?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So none of the ones that I am familiar with right now that are noise scholars have gone on to teach abroad, but it is an option. So like I was talking about, there's a large, there's huge deficits of teachers in the STEM fields across the world. It is not a U.S. problem. It is a world problem.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realize is when they think about going and teaching abroad, they think about teaching English abroad. But there are a lot of opportunities to teach science in English-speaking schools across the world. And so I don't have a direct experience with noise scholars. I do have one student that went to Japan and had been teaching. He had been he was teaching English, but then he was also teaching physics as well in an English-speaking school in Japan. He wasn't part of our noise program, but he did go off and do that. And so that is an option for teachers. There's also the ability to almost go wherever you want across the United States. If you don't like the state you live in, go somewhere else, right? You can move because the demand is there for STEM teachers.
And I imagine if you speak another language, I mean,
Yes.
science is kind of a universal language in itself, right? So if
Yes.
you speak another language, and that opens up your opportunities even more in some of those countries, correct?
Yes, it does. And it actually opens up your opportunities in the US even more. If you are bilingual and you are a STEM teacher, you are in the highest demand I can imagine. I know of science supervisors that would be falling over themselves trying to get to you before you even get out of university, especially if you're fluent in both English and Spanish across the United States, with Spanish being the largest second language and the second largest first language within the United States. Being bilingual and then also teaching STEM will put you in a position to do a couple of things. First off, definitely have a job wherever you want. And then also be able to make this lasting impact where you're going to be able to go into communities and change families. And because that's what teaching can do, and that's what education can do.
Hunter said, wow, that's really interesting to know. I was going to say the same thing, that combo advantage of that. We have time for one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. The question that I had is, I noticed when you were writing that teacher rated their lives better than most of the other professions. I wrote down the question, why? But then later on, you had mentioned one of the top things was their student relationships.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, in what capacity, I know that might be a very ambiguous question, but what is it that attracts the teachers to that student relationship in terms of what is that gratification there that they get?
Yeah, humans want to have an impact. And so humans want to have an impact on the people around them. They want to leave lasting impressions. They want to make the world a better place in general. And those that go into the teaching professions feel that very strongly. And it's those close relationships that you can end up having with students, where you get to watch them grow, you get to watch them change, you get to watch them go off and succeed, and oftentimes you get to see them go and have a lasting and positive impact in their communities as well. Having that impact in the community is often rated as one of the highest, sort of the most satisfying things about being a teacher. That's also true of physicians. So if you look at physicians and teachers at the top of the list, it makes a lot of sense, because physicians literally can save people's lives.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of, a lot of things that go into that. But at the end of the day, physicians will save people's lives, and there's a lot of gratification that comes out of that. So there's a huge benefit to the amount of training and the amount of the stress that goes into that job. And teaching is very similar. Maybe you're not directly saving lives, but you are saving lives in a lot of cases as a teacher, and you're having a huge impact on individuals and other humans, and you get to see it directly as a teacher. as opposed to sort of the indirect impacts that a large number of professions can end up having. So we can all have an impact no matter what we choose to do with our communities, but particularly teachers and physicians get to see it immediately right there in front of them. And so that relationship with the students really gets down to the impact that they get to have on the humans around them and their communities overall.
I do want to share this before we close out, and this is a message out to all teachers, and you can take this back if you like to some of those that you're helping start their career with. But I had recently lost my father, and I, out of nowhere, got a package from one of my dad's former students, and she had written a chapter about how much my father impacted her while she was in high school and changed her life, essentially. And I think that's an important message to share with teachers. Is it's also those students you don't realize that you have impacted, because we don't always hear all the stories, right? They don't always visit us. But that just opened my eyes up as far as in a teaching career, how much we contribute to society. And that book that was sent to me after he had passed, that chapter written about my father, really spoke volumes to me about that, the satisfaction of that kind of career. So anyway, I thought I'd leave that with you, Chris.
Yeah, we all have stories exactly like that.
Yep.
Both in, it's funny you say that, because the introduction to one of the books that I was showing there talks about the impact that a couple of teachers in particular had on me. One, a high school physical science and physics teacher when I was going through school. And then another one was my college professor the very first semester that I came in. And he had recently passed away when I was writing that book. And so I ended up dedicating that book to him because of the impact that he had on me as an individual. And then the impact that now I have because of what I do is indirectly because of him, right? Yeah. So it's a force multiplier that the impact that you get to have as a teacher is actually magnified, because it's like a lever, right? Because that group of students is going to go off and have massive impacts on their own, and because of you, right? And so that's one of the things that's most satisfying about the teaching profession, in particular in STEM. And it's one of the things that ranks it so high in job satisfaction.
Yeah. Chris, I know you have to jump off and go do another presentation today. I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you squeezed this in for us today, and it's greatly appreciated. I think your message was highly important for not only the teachers out there listening in, but also for those students that are considering a teaching career. This was a very important message for everyone to hear. So I want to thank you again, and I wish you well on all your other presentations today, and hopefully we get to hear from you again.
All right. Thank you so much.